All right. Good morning, everybody. Today, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about families. And you got to understand that, when it comes to families, families are the most important of the social structures. It's kind of like this, you have a lot of social structures that satisfy certain needs. You have religion, you have politics, you have all of these things that satisfy social needs, but family is the most important because without family, you can't have a culture to transmit. So, when we talk about families are all different based on culture. Some people, believe in extended families where the families all live together. When we live here in America, a lot of us are going to go off and be on our own at some point. And, the only time that we see mom and dad is when we go and visit them because we are out of state. It's kind of like, with my parents living in Alaska, and I see my parents maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. And it's because, that whole thing when you get to be 18, 19 years old and you want your independence, that's kind of how we do things. But, in places like China, and I've known people from Hong Kong, you got grandma, you got grandpa, you got brothers, sisters, all living in the same house together. Or what they're doing is they're buying property right next to each other. So, families are different really based on culture. It's, Western culture is sort of different in the sense that, when our old people can't function anymore, a lot of times what we do is we put them in a nursing home. And, it's that. And and that's kind of sad. But, again, going back to what we're talking about with China, in places like China, and in a lot of the world, the old people are actually taken care of by their relatives. So they're never left out. It's interesting, when we're talking about family and whatnot, in Eskimo culture and Inuit culture, the older people, what they traditionally have done is that when they cease to be useful to the community, a lot of times what they would do is they would go out into the snowpack and they would just go to sleep. And they would recognize that their usefulness was at an end and that they couldn't contribute. And so that's what they would do. Sounds really horrible from our perspective, but in Inuit culture, that's an acceptable thing to do. Excuse me while I take a drink. And so families are all different based on culture. In America, you got Muslim culture, you've got Mexican culture, you've got African American culture, you've got all sorts of different cultures, and all of them approach families in a different way. But when you're talking about what they function as, first thing you got to understand is that for the most part, what you guys are doing is you guys are existing to reproduce. That's your biological function. What you do is you will have children and you will teach your children culture, and you won't do it consciously. But that's the function of a family, is to transmit culture and teach it to the next generation, and then your children will do the same thing, and their children and their children. And that's how you get a sustained culture, and that's how you get families. The big problem in America that people are noticing is that families are breaking up. But what's happening is that families are actually blending. I come from a blended family. My stepdad, and I've got two brothers and I've got a sister, all from different dads. So, our family's kind of blended, and it always has been. When I was little, my dad, who is biologically not related to me, adopted me. So I took the last name of McPhail. That's part of the family system. That's what people do. That's a blended family. A lot of times, what a family does is a family teaches children how to survive. Yeah, and you know, you're going to learn values from your family. Like, that's all in one. You know, what they do too is they give you status. So I can say, okay, you know, I am a McPhail. I come from a long line of people who fought in World War I, World War II, Vietnam. You know, they all have a sort of status. And, you know, my ascribed status, the status that's given to me, is that I am a son. And I have all these cousins who are not related to me, but they accept me as a family member because I am the son of, or the adopted son of, Boyd Ray McPhail. You know, and that's really, you know, what family does for you. You know, and so, you know, when we're talking about this, you know, we talk about family being, you know, family by birth and family by marriage. Now, you know, I am biologically related to the Duplantises in Louisiana, and there's a lot of them. And, you know, they all come from Houma. They're all French-American, Cajun. And, you know, that's family by birth. You know, but family by marriage, I'm related to my stepdad, the Nestles, a whole bunch of people in Ohio, and that's family by marriage. You know, so family by blood, family by marriage. And then you've got my half-brother, my half-sister, and, of course, my other half-brother in Utah. So, I mean, you know, that's a lot of family members. And so, you know, when you're talking about family, it becomes very important. And some of it's very personal to people. You know, some people, you know, they believe that blood counts. And it does to a certain extent. But, you know, like you have people in the past who would only marry into their own family. And that sounds gross to us, but, you know, that was because they believed that blood was more important than anybody outside. So, you know, in the world today, what you have is you have two types of families. And you have nuclear families. And this is basically a husband, a wife, and the children. Or what's happening now is that the nuclear family is more or less defined as, you know, caregiver and children. Because a lot of times, let's look at it honestly. You guys may not have a dad, or you guys may not have a mom at home. So it is your mom, or your mom and significant other, or mom and stepdad, or mom and grandparents that are raising you, and so they become your nuclear family. You know, when you are talking about extended family, again, it goes back to you have cousins, you have uncles, you have grandparents, great-grandparents, all sort of living together or living in proximity. We knew people in the valley that would buy houses right next to each other. And so pretty soon you have a whole family that's living on one block. And that could be a lot of people. You know, and they would do that. That's your extended family. It happens in Africa all the time where people buy property if they have the money to do it, and they all live next to each other. And so everybody knows everybody's business. But see, the upside of that is that everybody gets taken care of. And everybody raises the kids. And nobody raises themselves. And so, you know, when you're talking about family, that's kind of what we're talking about. So, you know, you got to understand another thing, too, is that marriage is universal, but the way marriage is practiced is not always universal. So, for example, you have monogamy, which is a man and a woman. You have, and I have to look at my sheet to remember the terms, polygamy, which, of course, you know, watch the Tom Green video that and answer those questions, because he has 6 wives. You know, he's breaking the law, but he believes that God has brought those women to him. Then you've got polygyny, which is really just the same thing as polygamy. It's not, it's, you know, Polygamy is one man with many women. Polygyny is the same thing. But polyandry is one woman and several men simultaneously. So, I had to get that out. And so, these are the different forms of marriage, and not all of it is socially acceptable. In the United States, polygamy is actually technically illegal. But in Utah, people practice it kind of under the radar, and people tend to turn a blind eye until you get a guy like Tom Green who goes out and he publicly parades his wives and says, well, hey, look what I'm doing. Isn't this great? And then they have to do something about it. And you'll see that in the video. So, okay. So we've gotten to the point now where I've talked about this with you. Again, please watch that movie. Those questions are going to be graded. So, you keep turning that stuff into me. And hopefully we'll be back by the 4th. They haven't told us anything, so they're just assuming that we'll be back in school by the 4th. It may be longer. I do miss you guys. I miss the class. I miss teaching. I miss being in front of a bunch of people. Because I'm not good doing this in front of a computer screen. But take care. Okay? Do your work. Talk to you soon. Bye. Bye-bye.